From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where you may now feel free to refer to me as a ruggedly handsome man in his 50s, and where another week has gone by in which one of the greatest living Americans has passed from our midst. Willie Howard Mays Jr., Westfield, Alabama, Private First Class, U.S. Army, winner, Presidential Medal of Freedom, National League Rookie of the Year 1951, National League Batting Champion 1954, National League MVP 1954 and 65, four-time home run champion, four-time stolen base champion, 12-time Gold Glove winner, 24-time All-Star, first ballot Hall of Famer, bona fide American legend, passed away on Tuesday at the age of 93. We tip our caps and bow our heads in memory of a great ball player and an equally great man. May he rest in peace. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radio. So glad you could join us this evening. Here is your Decline of Western Civilization News Roundup for the work week ending Friday, 21 June, 2024. Dateline Canberra, Monday, 17 June. Police in the formerly democratic nation of Australia were accused this week of violently repressing pro-democracy demonstrators who were protesting the official visit of Chinese Prime Minister Li Chang. And I guess in the interest of equal treatment, they were also accused of roughing up a group of pro-communism protesters. The point being, the Australian government believes in fair play, by God. That means we brutally repress all forms of what people used to call protected political speech, irrespective of which side you're demonstrating for. And our goon squads, they play no favorites when they're deciding whose jaw to break with a rifle butt. It's fair dinkum right down the line, dead gummit, for every bloke and every Sheila. Prime Minister Chang, second in power only to Xi Jinping himself, is the first Chinese premier to visit Australia since 2017, and evidently the Aussie government was very eager to demonstrate that they've gotten much better at communist-style free speech crackdowns in the intervening 7 years, and we thought California was bad. All they did was clean the poop off the streets and bus all the junkies and vagrants off to the suburbs when Chairman Xi came to visit San Francisco. Prime Minister Chang's first stop on arriving in Australia was at the Adelaide Zoo, where he told an excited crowd that a brand new pair of giant pandas will be arriving soon. And if you know anything about the Chi-Coms, you know why the term panda diplomacy exists, because the Chi-Coms figured out a long time ago, to their credit, that pandas are the one thing everybody in the rest of the world loves that you can only get in China. So if you're in their good books and they're liking the cut of your jib, the way they show it is by giving your zoo a couple of pandas. If they think you're being too democratic and uncooperative, hey, take the damn pandas back and then eat them for dinner. Allegedly. Dateline London, Tuesday, 18 June. Reform UK Party leader Nigel Farage, who's currently riding a wave of public discontent that could well see the Tory party wiped off the political map entirely, and more quickly than anyone thought was possible, said this week that his movement and the party that represents it seeks to fuse the traditional with the radical through a renewed appreciation of British history and culture, combined with a realization that many of the country's governmental and political institutions are no longer fit for purpose and urgently in need of wholesale reform or outright abolition. And he also said a very, very naughty thing later on in the week, a thing that caused paroxysms of hysteria throughout the British fake news establishment, a thing that makes it absolutely imperative that he never, ever get his hands on the reins of power. And what was it? Well, he gently broached the possibility that maybe NATO's expansionism and provocations might have had something to do with precipitating the Russia-Ukraine war. And the frenzied reaction to this statement tells you quite a lot about how divorced from reality the people are who are supposed to be the journalistic establishment, because there should really be nothing remotely controversial about what Mr. Farage said. Some of us, many of us in fact, have been making the exact same point for a good number of years now. In fact, it was about 30 years ago, I think, the first time I ever found myself asking, how come the newest member of NATO is like 1,000 miles away from the North Atlantic? And for that matter, why is NATO expanding at all when there is no longer a freaking Soviet Union? Shouldn't NATO have disbanded itself the very next day after Christmas 1991 when the Soviet Union ceased to exist? And then there always is some idiot who calls me a Putin-loving Russian sympathizer when I say this, and I don't care. Here it comes anyway. From where this reporter is sitting, NATO is the greatest threat to peace in the Western Hemisphere presently, and the European Union is in second place. As far as Russia goes, well, they have failed to conquer their much smaller, much weaker neighbor. After 2.5 years of trying now, the only territory they hold is the areas of eastern Ukraine that are ethnically Russian anyway, and whether anybody wants to hear it or not, it is overwhelmingly likely that that is going to remain the status quo post-bellum. The conflict at this point is basically First World War trench warfare with an occasional drone and guided missile, and the Russian fleet? Well, their flagship is currently incapable of steaming under its own power, and their backup flagship got sent to the bottom because it failed to detect and interdict an attack from a 1982-era missile. So yeah, do tell me more about how NATO has to always get bigger and more odious and more provocative in order to counter the threat of a Russian bear that is missing one leg and has arthritis in the other three. Dateline Salisbury Plain, Wiltshire, Wednesday, 19 June. Idiots with orange paint vandalized Stonehenge this week in protest against... Christ, who knows? I mean, I'm pretty sure Neolithic age Britons weren't burning a whole hell of a lot of fossil fuels 4,000 years ago, so why is Just Stop Oil angry at Stonehenge? Unclear. But the intellectual incoherence of the act is not the point. The point is what this tells us about the worldview of the radical left here in the third decade of the 21st century. And it's not unique to eco-warrior idiots like these Stonehenge clowns, or animal rights idiots, or social justice race huckster idiots, or any other variety of dumb woke retard. What they all have in common is a deep-seated desire to attack and destroy all aspects of humanity's cultural and historic heritage. People like these Stonehenge fools, I call them the eco-Taliban because that is exactly what they are. The motivations may be different, but the end result is exactly the same. It is the wholesale, gleeful destruction of cultural heritage. The Bamiyan Buddhas were arguably the most important ancient colossal sculptural works anywhere in the world outside of Egypt that still existed at the beginning of this century. And dynamiting them to dust was number one on the Taliban's priority list when they first gained power in Afghanistan. They are un-Islamic, therefore they must be destroyed. And despite an outcry from every other country in the world, no argument for preserving them was ever seriously contemplated, because that is how religious fanaticism works. It doesn't brook any moderation or any half measures. The evil thing must be destroyed because it is evil. And in a very real sense, the eco-Taliban are even more fanatical and less restrained than the actual Taliban, because the actual Taliban, they at least have a theoretical limiting principle. They only want to blow things up that are offensive to their own interpretation of their own religion. The eco-Taliban, on the other hand, they want to destroy the entire cultural heritage of the entire human race, and they ain't picky. They will pull down monuments, vandalize statues, destroy painting. If it's a thing from history that people enjoy looking at, these people want to eradicate it. Because when you're at a museum looking at a nice statue or a nice painting, or when you're visiting Salisbury Plain and marveling at the engineering achievements of ancient humans who had neither the wheel nor the pulley, that is a distraction from the things your self-appointed intellectual overlords think you should be spending your time on. And since these are certifiably crazy people, they see a very simple solution to the problem. Just destroy the things people enjoy looking at, then we will have their undivided attention. And the most solemn responsibility we have as the generation that currently occupies the earth is to preserve our cultural heritage so it can be passed on to our descendants, just as our ancestors passed it on to us. And we are beset with maniacs who seek to destroy that heritage that we are charged with safeguarding, and it is our moral duty to oppose them as strenuously as a thing can be opposed. Dateline Washington, Thursday, 20 June. In a bit of news that pretty much wrecks the last half-century of Democrat Party political strategery, an Equus poll released on Thursday shows that Latino voters, by a 3-point margin, favor Donald Trump's immigration policies over those of President and semi-animated cadaver Joe Biden. But wait, I hear you saying. Didn't the Democrats conclude, like all the way back in the LBJ Great Society days, that if they went soft on immigration and jammed as many illegal aliens into the country as humanly possible, that all Latinos would love them forever and they would never lose an election? Well, yeah, they did conclude that, and they have been doggedly pursuing that vision ever since, but it would seem, surprise of all surprises, that Latino citizens aren't any bigger fans of mass illegal migration and the crime and drugs and economic instability that accompany it than non-Latino citizens are. I mean, who would have thought? And is there anything better than when a dumb racist assumption like that comes back to bite the Democrats in the ass? In the opinion of this reporter, no, there is not. In its write-up of the poll results, Axios reported, and I'm surprised Axios would even report on a poll like this, quote, once reliably Democratic voters, many Latinos are increasingly identifying as independent, and working-class voters are leaning more toward the GOP, end quote. Gosh, it's almost like law-abiding citizens don't like having their wages and prosperity artificially depressed by rampant criminality that's being promoted and facilitated by the party that claims to be the exclusive representative of the minority working class. It's almost like ordinary people just want a decent place to live and to raise their families and a fair chance at economic upward mobility. It's almost like those views don't change according to one's skin tone and ethnic heritage, and what a shock that is. Here I thought you could just stick people into boxes according to their external physical characteristics and then reliably predict their voting behavior for all time. The hell are we gonna do now? I know, maybe we should have the president go on some podcast and say, if you can't figure out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't Mexican. Hell, maybe he could learn to say it in Spanish. Si no sabes si estás a favor de mí o de Trump, entonces no eres mexicano. Actually, on second thought, let's not have him do that. He has enough trouble with his own native language. And the last thing we need is another Si Se Puede incident, am I right? You're all as diverse as a bunch of breakfast tacos. The moral of the story in the end, nobody does Hispanic outreach like the Biden family does Hispanic outreach. No idea why those numbers are collapsing, guys. It's a real mystery. Dateline, aboard the Disney Death Star currently in orbit around planet Volveria, Friday, 21 June. In this week's Pride Month update, would you believe things have actually gotten worse for the Acolyte? The audience score is down to an astounding 14%, and it seems even the woke industry shill critics have given up on this piece of shit, because even that number, which originally sat in the high 90s, is hovering down around 70% now. And it's just like Lyndon Johnson said about Walter Cronkite. If we've lost the woke industry shill critics, goddammit, we've lost America! But the star of this travesty, the magnificent mulatto herself, Amanda Lestenberg, she's got this whole thing figured out. The Acolyte isn't a shitty show, and she isn't a terrible actress. She is a victim of racist, misogynist, homophobic review bombers and toxic white male fans. And damn it, she is mad as hell, and she is not going to take it anymore. And when the world has wronged you like that, when it cruelly backs you into a corner, when you want to set the record straight once and for all and totally own the haters, what do? Well, you write a terrible song and you show the world your vulva. I mean, in the damage control industry, I believe the technical term for it is the Madonna Gambit. There's no PR disaster you can't fix by shoving your Mons Venus right in the world's face and shaking it like you just don't care. And look, I actually have to give credit where it's due here. In order to make a camel toe pop through a pair of denim shorts, you gotta have a major league set of meat curtains on you. And by all appearances, unless she was rocking some kind of a falsie under there, Miss Stenberg does indeed have a major league set of meat curtains. And as much as I would like to play certain parts of this video for you, not gonna risk it, because this thing has been getting mocked so widely and so mercilessly that Disney has started copyright claiming people for using it, which is weird, since Amanda claims that she wrote the song and shot the video all by herself in a period of 72 hours. So why would Disney be copyright claiming it, I wonder? Gosh, it's almost like they had this whole fake controversy planned out ahead of time, and everything about this dumb, cringy video and song were done under the Disney Star Wars imprimatur. But nah, perish that thought. I'm sure this is all totally organic. Do you want to hear some of the lyrics? Yeah, of course you do. Quote, I was running from city to city to speak on a story, you know the one, police murdering a black boy. My people cried in the theaters, finding release. White people cried. They could see us as human beings. Trevor asked what I want the people to know. I say white people crying was the goal. If they could take one thing, what would it be? I say empathy. Ooh, that's why they mad at me. They splice lines, make hate they recognize, make it look like the same propaganda they spew, cause they conflate our pain with violence and try to weaponize everything that we do. The desperation of oppressors is rising, and now they holding on to any old thing they can use. If you rely upon misinformation, then that tells me you afraid of the truth. End quote. Yeah, so that's a thing that exists. A thing that Miss Stenberg and all of her superiors at the Walt Disney Company somehow, someway, decided was a good idea. I would love to see how that meeting went, wouldn't you? Okay, our new show is being called not just the worst ever Star Wars product, not just the worst ever Disney Plus show, but quite possibly the absolute worst thing in the history of audio-visual entertainment. What do you think we could do to make this even worse? I feel like if I went to ChatGPT and typed in "give me the absolute shittiest rap lyrics in the history of the world," it would vomit out something pretty close to this. So to recap, for those of you fans keeping score at home, Amandla Stenberg, 25-year-old half-black, half-Danish woman who hates the white half of herself with the burning hot intensity of 1,000 suns, raised in a lap of luxury and affluence of which 99% of the population can scarcely conceive, who's been on the payroll of the Walt Disney Company since the age of 4, says she is a victim, and you and I are her oppressors. Her proof? Well, she went to a black neighborhood, probably the first black neighborhood she's ever been to, and danced around like a retarded stripper, sticking her sex organs right up in the camera lens. And I think we've all learned never to mess with this strong black, well, sort of black, queer woman of color ever again, because she has clapped back on her haters, according to certain sectors of the woke fake news media, and I think we, her awful, hateful, bigoted critics who committed the dastardly crime of thinking a show that she was in sucked, are all as chastened as we well ought to be. Really, I think there's only one question remaining. Did those meat curtains come from her Danish side or her black side? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the week that was. May it rest in peace. And with that, I tossed it over to my illustrious colleague, your distinguished co-host, the man who is to large furry hominids what Dr. Edward Jenner is to smallpox, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where senility is just a state of mind and denial ain't just a river in Mexico. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Delighted you could join us this evening. Here is your Decline of Western Civilization News Roundup for the final week of June 2024. Dateline aboard the Disney Death Star, Monday, 24 June. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, would you believe things are still getting worse for the Acolyte? I mean, is it even possible for things to get worse when you're already sitting at a 14% audience score, when this show was already the most widely mocked thing on the internet since the Lady Ghostbusters movie from 2016, when the CEO of Disney Star Wars is now on the record as saying the 86% of people who think this show sucks are all racist, woman-hating homophobes, when last week's attempt at damage control consisted of the show's lead actress releasing history's most cringeworthy song and music video in which she whines about how oppressed she is while inviting the viewer to give her a gynecological exam? Well, yes, amazingly, it turns out things can get even worse than that. And as long as it keeps doing that, We will be here to help you revel in every last delicious bit of it. Leslie Headland, the creator and showrunner of this piece of shit, former Harvey Weinstein personal assistant, the woman with the squarest face in America who isn't named Pramila Jayapal. She is now walking back the claim that she was making so openly and gleefully just a few short weeks ago that The Acolyte is the gayest Star Wars ever, which it would seem like you shouldn't need to make that claim in the first place since the show is about strong, powerful, queer women of color being scissored into existence by lesbian space witches, so I feel like it was pretty goddamn self-evident already that it's the gayest Star Wars ever, and Ms. Headland seemed quite gleeful about promoting it as such, at least right up until the audience score started dropping like a lead manhole cover dropped from 30,000 feet above a black hole. Except Leslie still wants to have it both ways, it seems. So if you're a non-gay person who watches this thing and laughs at how overpoweringly, stultifyingly gay it is, then you are being, quote, simple-minded, pernicious, and reductive, end quote. But if you're a gay person, then you totally should feel free to view it as the gayest Star Wars ever. And I, for one, really find it very gratifying taking my moral and intellectual guidance from Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant. It's almost like going to O.J. Simpson for advice on how not to murder your ex-wife and her friend. Dateline Washington, Tuesday, 25 June, which may or may not have been Lady Curmudgeon's 50th birthday, but I am a chivalrous husband to the last, and we don't talk about such things. White House Press Secretary Baghdad Buckwheat proved once again this week why we call her Baghdad Buckwheat, as she appeared to assert in public, with a straight face, in apparent total seriousness, that grocery prices have not gone up during the tenure of her boss, President and semi-animated cadaver Joe Biden. And she did it with the impeccable eloquence and deft turn of phrase that we have come to expect from the first gay, black, female, homosexual, queer, lesbian woman of color ever to occupy that post, when she stated on MSNBC's Morning Joe, quote, eggs and milk, and there were grocery things that were up. It has gone down. It has gone down since 2022. And first, in the interest of full disclosure, how fervently do I wish that I possessed a mastery of the English language that even approached this strong, powerful woman of color who don't need no man for nothing and gets paid a 7-figure salary to say words in public. Second, did you notice how she gave the game away right at the very end of that quote? Oh yeah, these prices are totally down since 2022. Which, setting aside the fact that it is still a bald-faced lie, even with that caveat, because how many items on your grocery store shelf cost less today than they did 2 years ago? Bueller. But it's still an attempt to play that same dumb rhetorical game that they play with Bidenflation, because these people, as dumb and unexceptional as they are, they really do have a very deep and abiding contempt for your intelligence. They really do think they are very, very much smarter than you, because Baghdad Buckwheat thinks she can get away with saying, oh yeah, prices have come down from the insane heights that they started hitting immediately after we took over and started blasting trillions and trillions of dollars of fake money into the economy like a bunch of drunken sailors on the mother of all 72-hour shore leaves. And it's the same thing when she and all these other shameless lying douchebags try to tell you, oh yeah, inflation's gone way down from where it was a couple years ago. And the thing that gets conveniently omitted is, after our policies made the damn thing increase by 642% in the first calendar year after we got here. Which seems like a fairly obvious follow-up question, doesn't it? When the president's spokesperson claims they've reduced inflation, doesn't it seem like the next thing you would ask is, but didn't it increase 642% the first year that you guys were on the job? But since I am not a professional journalismer, maybe I am just hopelessly out of my depth here. Maybe there's a perfectly sound reason why an honest practitioner of the journalistic arts would fail to ask such a screamingly obvious follow-up question when he is so obviously having smoke blown directly up his bottom hole in such brazen fashion by such an unskilled liar. But here's what I do know. If the president himself were here with us right now, this is exactly what he would say. At least we beat Medicare, but we never saved Uncle Bozy. Dateline Chicago, Wednesday, 26 June. In this week's Pride Month update, LGBTQIA EIEIO activists erupted in rage and fury this week. There's a first, that never happens. after a young woman named Corbin Albert was selected for the U.S. national soccer team. And what did Miss Albert do that makes her presence on the roster so very intolerable? Well, she openly identifies as a Christian. It's weird that you have to say it that way now. And here's the really grotesque part, so brace yourself and make sure the children have turned away. She once reposted a sermon from her church in which the pastor criticized transgenderism. And did this cause a major 5-alarm rage-gasm on Rainbow Twitter? Oh, what do you think? You bet your sweet ass it did. We wouldn't be here if it didn't. Look, if you people would just start getting the memo that tolerance means you share the opinions of the radical left lunatic fringe, no exceptions, or else this stuff would be a lot easier. There wouldn't be the need for all this divisiveness if you damn bigots would just start having the correct opinions. Here's a small sampling of the very rational, very well-reasoned responses on Rainbow Twitter to the scandalous news of a straight Christian girl being on the U.S. national team. Quote, "Never thought I'd see the U.S. women's national team continue to choose a player like Corbin Albert after her homophobic, transphobic stuff. Never mind linking the Rapinos' injury post over their legacy of being an inclusively team historically filled with queer players. It's a shame and an embarrassment." Quote, "It's a slap in the face to the LGBTQ community that has been a backbone of the U.S. women's national team for decades to continue to allow Corbin Albert to be part of this team without her publicly reckoning with how her hateful rhetoric not only harms fans, but also her very teammates." My God, take a chill pill there, Karen. You know how sometimes you read a thing and you can actually hear the sound of a cuckoo clock in your head? Yeah. Continuing on, quote, "I'm not going to lie, but it feels homophobic to have Corbin Albert on this team instead of Alex Morgan." And look, I'm just going to throw this out there. You don't suppose she got selected for the team because she's better at playing soccer? And the coaching staff thinks she gives the team the best chance of winning? I know, it's a bunch of crazy talk, but sometimes it falls to me to play the contrarian, so here we are. And it's difficult not to notice that none of the LGBTQIA EIEIO activists who are engaged in the rage gasming make any sort of soccer-based argument for why Miss Albert shouldn't be on the roster. They are simply howling at the moon about how she should be excluded, nay, must be excluded, because she doesn't have a set of personal socio-political views that Rainbow Twitter finds acceptable. And you know what? Fuck them. Corbin Albert, you just became my favorite player on the U.S. women's national team. You go get him, girl. You are on that roster because you damn well earned your spot. Now get out there and shut the mouths of all those idiots and make them look like the bigoted fools they are. I pledge here and now that every goal you score will be mentioned right here on this program. Dateline, Washington, Thursday, 27 June. In a decision that some legal analysts are calling the biggest blow to the federal administrative state in the last 80 years, which means we love it already, the Supreme Court this week overturned the Chevron decision, which has held for over the last 40 years that government agencies possess wide latitude to interpret the intent of the laws they are charged with enforcing. In describing the Chevron precedent, Chief Justice John Roberts began his majority opinion by saying, quote, "If a court determines that a federal law is silent or ambiguous with respect to the specific issue at hand, the court must, at Chevron's second step, defer to the agency's interpretation if it is based on a permissible construction of the statute," end quote. And he goes on to say, quote, "Congress in 1946 enacted the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act, as a check upon administrators whose zeal might otherwise have carried them to excesses not contemplated in legislation creating their offices. It was the culmination of a comprehensive rethinking of the place of administrative agencies in a regime of separated and divided powers," end quote. And here is where they get to the crux of the matter. Quote, "The difference that Chevron requires of courts reviewing agency action cannot be squared with the APA. In the decades between the enactment of the APA and this court's decision in Chevron, courts generally continued to review agency interpretations of the statutes they administer by independently examining each statute to determine its meaning," end quote. The point being, the courts have given too much latitude to the interpretive rights of the respective agencies under the APA, with the result that the agencies have enjoyed a sort of extrajudicial carte blanche to interpret laws and regulations as broadly or as narrowly or as self-servingly as they please. This decision, thankfully, starts to end that, and this is one hell of a good start. If the federal tentacle monster is ever to be dismantled in some meaningful way within our lifetimes, we need lots more decisions just like this one. We have had nearly one full century at this point in which the central government has only grown bigger, only grown more odious, more wasteful, more incompetent, and more corrupt. And if you've been wondering why the Democrat media complex has been so eager to assault the institutional credibility of the Supreme Court recently, well, there's your answer right there. Dateline, Brentwood, Tennessee, Friday, 28 June. In this week's Get Woke, Go Broke update, Tractor Supply has announced that after a prolonged and apparently quite severe customer backlash, they are abandoning all woke DEI nonsense with immediate effect. The company said in a statement, quote, "We work hard to live up to our mission and values every day and represent the values of the communities and customers we serve. We have heard from customers that we have disappointed them. We have taken this feedback to heart." End quote. The statement goes on to announce the following measures. 1, we will no longer submit data to the Human Rights Campaign. 2, we will refocus our team member engagement groups on mentoring, networking, and supporting the business. 3, further focused on rural American priorities, including agricultural education, animal welfare, veteran causes, and being a good neighbor, and stop sponsoring non-business activities like pride festivals and voting campaigns. 4, eliminate DEI roles and retire our current DEI goals while still ensuring a respectful environment. 5, withdraw our carbon emission goals and focus on our land and water conservation efforts. And ladies and gentlemen, you've heard me say this a number of times. I'm going to say it again. The greatest weapons you have, your eyeballs, your wallet. Use them judiciously and wisely, and this madness will go away more quickly than you could ever imagine. So if there is a Tractor Supply near you, there isn't one near me, but if there is one near you, go there and spend some money and tell them this is why you are spending it. And the community of purple-haired transgender farmers, they will just have to get over their lack of representation, because did Tractor Supply have that much of an LGBTQIA EIEIO audience to begin with? I'm just saying. Here endeth the Roundup. That is the week that was. May it rest in peace. And may Martin Mull rest in peace, who just passed away the other day. A comic genius, many decades ahead of his time. Godspeed to Mr. Mull. Fernwood forever. And with that, I pass the con to my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the man who is to the control board what Liberace is to the piano, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.